Let's Get Crafty friends. In our most recent Let's Get Crafty, we took these old CDs from outdated programs like Printmaster and Streets 98, things that we don't need anymore. They're just taking up space in the house, and cut them up into little tile pieces and turned them into mosaics. At Let's Get Crafty, we made 2 different mosaic styles, and in today's video, I am going to not only show you the basics of how to do those 2, but then also expand into 2 other projects. So let's get crafty.
For the Upcycled reflective art project, to show you 4 different crafts that you can do. 2 that are the ones that we did in Let's Get Crafty, and that kind of expand upon what we did. They all have the same basic set of skills, but they look different. I will show you a Starburst mosaic and the wood shim mosaic, as well as 2 additional projects that I'm going to work on. If you receive supplies from me, you will have a wooden shim, some small wooden sticks, some glue, and you will already have CD pieces that are cut. And I'm going to show you how to break up the CDs in case you don't already have that. In addition, 2 projects that I will show you will include this piece of extra wood that I have and this wooden box. And I've included paint because I plan to paint this box before I add my mosaic. The skills for all of these projects will be the same. It's just really how you want to apply it. So if there's something else that you would prefer to apply the CD pieces to, then feel free to do it. So the first thing you will need to do is to cut up your CDs. And while there are lots of videos on how to do that, many of them are actually talking about DVDs and not CDs. So in this video, I will show you the only way that I found to effectively cut up the CDs. So the first thing we'll need to do is to add some boiling water. Now we let the boiling water sit for 10 minutes.
Take the CDs out one at a time to cut them up. Please remember that the water is still hot. So use something like the end of your scissors or a pen or a pair of tongs to take the CD out of the water. I'll dry the CD off, and then I'll use a pair of scissors to cut it up. I suggest using a tray to cut the CD pieces into, because otherwise they will fly all over, so please be careful. Please also note that it is very possible that depending upon your pair of scissors, that they may break. So please use a pair of scissors that you are not attached to if you plan to cut up many CDs. So holding your scissors slightly at an angle and in towards the tray, you want to start by making some cuts. If your CD is hot enough, you will find that most of the time you can make these clean cuts without any breaks along here. However, that might not always be the case. I found that making cuts straight across was most effective when trying to get some regular sized pieces. And sometimes I even put these back in the water while I was cutting up the rest of the CDs. It doesn't really matter what shapes you cut, as long as you are happy with the shapes that you cut. I found that I used a lot of triangles. If you want this to come off, if you don't want the colors, you might be able to peel it off once it's been in the water, or you may need to use some tape, like some clear packing tape, if you want those pieces to come off. There are other instructional videos online if you are interested in cutting up DVDs, because you can split the DVDs into thinner pieces, and then you might be able to do other forms of cutting. I saw that people were able to cut shapes like circles when they used DVDs, but I'm not able to cut clear shapes as circles out of the CD.
This one is the Starburst piece of art. I'm going to show you basics for how to start a project, and then I will show you how mine ended after Crafty, and I don't think any of you will have a hard time figuring out how to take the steps in between. The first thing I'm going to do is to take the longer sticks and use 4 of them to make my longest starburst section. And then I will break these in half. They don't have to be real pretty or exact, but just break them in half and use those as the in-betweens. And what matters here is if you want them to be the same length, is to get the same length around the outside. It does not matter as much if they are the same placement inside, because that will be covered and no one will see the inside. Another option instead of doing this is to start with one long one and then go around the edge, getting shorter and shorter and shorter. By the time you get over here, just having a little itty bitty one poking out, and that kind of gives like a seashell look. And I've seen a bunch of those. The last thing I'm going to do is to put down some smaller wood sticks with points on the ends, because I think they have a sun ray back. Tacky glue usually comes sealed, so all you have to do is cut off that end there, and then tacky glue works pretty well to stick wood craft sticks to the CD, and one does not have to be particularly neat with this, since again all of these pieces will be hidden inside this. Something I've learned to watch is the angles for which I'm placing the sticks. That is more important. So if I want them to have a particular pattern or design, it is important to watch while they're still wet for which direction my sticks are pointing, which is actually why I am choosing to use certain sticks before other sticks, just so that I can try to use those angles. For example, I want this one to be directly across from this one. While the glue is still wet, it is possible for them to get popped. Like this one did. While it's wet, you can just adjust where you want the stick to go. Once your craft sticks are placed, you can move on to the second CD. If you are only using one CD, then you might want to wait for this one to dry completely before flipping it over. But since I will be using these seconds sandwiching the craft sticks, I can move on to the second part. So this is the portion where I'm only going to show you a little bit of how this works, and then I will show you what my final project looked like from Let's Get Crafty. So really here there is no right or wrong. There is only what you think is beautiful. So I simply put some glue down and put some pieces down. If you are interested in a particular pattern, I found that sometimes laying out the pieces ahead of time can be helpful. But for this particular style of mosaic, I did not have anything in mind other than that I wanted to build a solid layer out and then kind of build up to give it more of that dome shape. When my top CD is fully decorated the way that I want it to be, I will move it aside, put some glue here, and move the two pieces together. At the end of Let's Get Crafty, this is what my project ended up looking like, with a solid layer on the bottom and then building up towards the middle until there's only one up in the middle. Then I also chose to put some CD pieces out and around to help give it a little more of that sunburst look. You can tell it is very reflective, and I will probably use a push pin just to hang it up through the hole in the back here, but other people chose to attach a string here so that they could hang it up a different way. One could also attach a magnet or other such things like that. When I was cutting the CDs, I found it very difficult to cut anything effectively besides things with flat edges. So while I tried to cut some circle pieces, it did not work well. Other people, especially when using DVDs and tutorials, seem to have ease in cutting circles, and then they were able to put circles out here, which was a little prettier, but I think that these other geometric shapes worked just fine. The next project we did at Let's Get Crafty was to use this wooden shim, just a little thin piece of wood. When making a mosaic on the shim, I simply laid out some CD until I had something that I found appealing. So I'm just going to do just a couple here to give you the idea. But what I did that I found worked best was to actually put down a whole bunch of glue and then to squish that right into the glue, leaving extras around the edges. Craft glue tends to dry clear, but it still dries with its same thickness. what I liked about the glue here in the middle when it dried was that it gave the appearance of a mortar. I did try to be careful not to get too much glue on the actual surface, but it is possible to go back and clean those surfaces when you're done. So once I had something that I was happy with, then I could let it dry, but the idea would be to cover the whole area of the stick. Because this end is so thin down here, if you wanted to be able to hang it, you could just put a hole through here with like an awl or a hole punch, or poke a nail through there carefully, and then you can hang it up that way, or you can also set it when it's dry up on one end. While this one is also still in progress, something I did with these thicker spots was I went back and colored it with Sharpie and gave my space in between a little bit of color. Another option, like what I will do with the tray, is to paint it or even color it with Sharpie before you use it to give it a background color that way, so that these spaces where the glue is dried clear will already show up that color, but you can also go back and color at the level that the glue has come to, like it will here. So just the other day I was commenting about how I could really use a little box to keep all the notes that I take right on my desk so that I know where I put them all. And when this project came up, I could not resist the urge to make this little teeny tiny box. It's the perfect size for sticky notes, and it will help me to reflect in this season. It's a little plain right now, so before I coat it in the CD pieces for reflecting, I am going to paint it with this dragonfly paint. I just have a little bit left over from a project that I had already done, but I thought that this might be a good way to use the little bit that I had left. So I'm going to go ahead and paint this, get it ready. So as you can see, my tray is now all painted, and I did paint a couple of coats on it because the wood was sucking the paint in. So similar to some of the other projects, my goal here is to create a mosaic. Because it's a confined space, it might make it a little more difficult to get all the exact shapes and pieces that are going to fit so beautifully in here. So I think instead of laying out the perfect plan, I'm just going to try. If I need to, I will move some things around. For this project, I'm going to use one of my craft sticks just to help me spread out the glue, just so I can make sure to get these corners. And to make it a little sticky and gluey. In this process, it's not surprising, but if you really don't like that feeling, I would suggest using one of the longer sticks so that your fingers are further away from the glue itself. So the tray needs to dry, but I think otherwise it's pretty much done. So for the last project, I wanted to go a little bit fancier and actually create a word out of the seed pieces and try to make a mosaic around it. I haven't tried this yet, but since I've tried other things similar, I thought I would give it a whirl. The one thing I have tried out is coloring the CD pieces that are going to make the word to help separate them from the other pieces, and that seems like it's going to work. So I'm gonna turn this tray around and get started with that first. This little piece of flooring left over, so I'm going to put this flat part at the bottom and this bumpy part is the top, because with the flat part at the bottom, you can actually stand up just like that. So it will make a nice tabletop decoration. You might be able to tell I'm being a little bit lighter handed on the glue for this. I really do want the wood to shine through. I do not plan on coloring in the lines in between like I did on my shim. So unlike the shim, in this case I really do want to try to map out whether or not I can make this look good. And if so, how? I also want to make sure that I have enough pieces left. I'm doing all the other projects in order to fill this in. I maybe sort of kind of does not work on this type of project.
So as you can probably tell, the piece mosaic that I've started is much further along than when you last saw it. I took a break off camera and worked on it for a while. And I just wanted to show you one or two of the techniques that I used that I will probably also use to fill in some of the gaps in here. And primarily what I was doing was finding smaller pieces of CD, trying to see where they might fit, and then trimming off some of the edges with my pair of scissors. I find this one of the better techniques to fill in some of these smaller gaps. However, on some of my mosaics, I like those open spots. On these two in particular, because they're so close, I wanted to fill in some of those little gaps with just a little bit more. So very carefully, knowing that these are likely to shoot off, I face it away from my body, especially away from my face, and cut off a smaller piece. And then that little piece really wants to stay in there. So then using the paintbrush and the glue, dab and cover it, and put it in to fill the gap. On the piece mosaic, I just have a few tiny gaps around the edges that I can choose to fill. And depending upon how picky I'm feeling, maybe a couple of the little smaller pieces in the middle. Sometimes when I have cut off other pieces, I end up with just these tiny little shards, which end up being fairly perfect for some of these gaps. While the sunburst might be a quick activity, I have found that on mosaics where I'm looking to go into this much detail and to fill in this much detail on the edges, that it is not a quick project. It is one that I should expect to spend a lot of time on, and it is completely okay to take breaks and come back to it, especially if I start to get frustrated or annoyed. Those breaks are really important. This type of crafting should be joy-filled and not a stress inducer in and of itself. So here we go. So here's piece mosaic. And here is my reflective mosaic tray. So I'm really excited about some of the different projects that we were able to create, like this piece mosaic here, a piece of art that we can set right up on a desk or give as a gift, which I think I'm going to do this holiday season. And so it was wonderful to be able to take something outdated and transform it into something new and exciting. I hope that you will be at our next Let's Get Crafty when we do something with lights. In the meantime, keep getting crafty.